The Campaign. Joseph Addison. The Campaign, a poem, to his grace the Duke of Marlborough. While crowds of princes your deserts proclaim, proud in their number to enroll your name. While emperors to you commit their cause, and Anna's praises crown the vast applause. Accept, great leader, what the muse recites, that in ambitious verse attempts your fights. Ferdinand transported with a theme so new, 10,000 wonders opening to my view shine forth at once. Sieges and storms appear, and wars and conquests fill the important year. Rivers of blood I see, and hills of slain, and Iliad rising out of one campaign. The haughty Gaul beheld, with towering pride, his ancient bounds enlarged on every side. Pyrenees' lofty barriers were subdued, and in the midst of his wide empire stood Ausonia's states, the victor to restrain, opposed their Alps and Apennines in vain, nor found themselves, with strength of rocks immered, behind their everlasting hills secured. The rising Danube its long race began, and half its course through the new conquests ran. Almost anxious for her sovereign's fates, Germania trembled through 100 states. Great Leopold himself was seized with fear. He gazed around, but saw no succor near. He gazed, and half abandoned to despair. His hopes on heaven, and confidence in prayer. To Britain's queen the nations turn their eyes, on her resolves the western world relies, confiding still, amidst its dire alarms, in Anna's counsels, and in Churchill's arms. Thrice happy Britain, from the kingdom's rent, to fit the guardian of the continent, that sees her bravest son advanced so high, and flourishing so near her prince's eye. Thy favorites grow not up by fortune's sport, or from the crimes or follies of the court. On the firm basis of desert they rise, from long-tried faith and friendship's holy ties. Their sovereign's well-distinguished smiles they share, her ornaments in peace, her strength in war. The nation thanks them with a public voice. By showers of blessings heaven approves their choice. Envy itself is dumb, in wanderlust, and factions strive who shall applaud the most. Soon as soft vernal breezes warm the sky, Britannia's colors in the zephyrs fly. Her chief already has his march begun, crossing the provinces himself had won, till the Moselle, appearing from afar, retards the progress of the moving war. Delightful stream, had nature bid her fall in distant climes far from the perjured Gaul. But now a purchase to the sword she lies. Her harvests for uncertain owners rise, each vineyard doubtful of its master grows, and to the victor's bowl each vintage flows. The discontented shades of slaughtered hosts, that wandered on her banks, her heroes' ghosts hopped, when they saw Britannia's arms appear. The vengeance due to their great deaths was near. Our godlike leader, ere the stream he passed, the mighty scheme of all his labors cast, forming the wondrous year within his thought. His bosom glowed with battles yet unfought. The long laborious march he first surveys, and joins the distant Danube to the Meuse, between whose floods such breathless forests grow, such mountains rise, so many rivers flow. The toil looks lovely in the hero's eyes, and danger serves but to enhance the prize. Big with the fate of Europe, he renews his dreadful course, and the proud foe pursues. Infected by the burning scorpion's heat, the sultry gales round his trussed temples beat, till on the borders of the main he finds defensive shadows, and refreshing winds. Our British youth, with inborn freedom bold, unnumbered scenes of servitude behold, nations of slaves, with tyranny debased, their maker's image more than half defect. Hourly instructed, as they urge their toil, to prize their queen, and love their native soil. Still to the rising sun they take their way through clouds of dust, and gain upon the day. When now any car on its friendly coast with cooling streams revives the fainting host, that cheerfully his labors past forgets, the midnight watches, and the noonday heats. O'er prostrate towns and palaces they pass, now covered o'er with woods, and hid in grass, breathing revenge. Whilst anger and disdain fire every breast, and boil in every vein, here shattered walls, like broken rocks, from far rise up in hideous views, the guilt of war, whilst here the vine o'er hills of ruin climbs, industrious to conceal great Bourbon's crimes. At length the fame of England's hero drew Eugenio to the glorious interview. Great souls by instinct to each other turn, demand alliance, and in friendship burn, a sudden friendship, while with stretched out rays they meet each other, mingling blaze with blaze, polished in courts, and hardened in the field, renowned for conquest, and in council skilled, their courage dwells not in a troubled flood of mounting spirits, and fermenting blood, lauded in the soul, with virtue overruled, inflamed by reason, and by reason cooled, in hours of peace content to be unknown, and only in the field of battle shown, to souls like these, in mutual friendship joined, heaven dares entrust the cause of humankind. Britannia's graceful sons appear in arms, her harassed troops the hero's presence warms, whilst the high hills and rivers all around with thundering peals of British shouts resound, doubling their speed, they march with fresh delight, eager for glory, and require the fight. So the staunch hound the trembling deer pursues, and smells his footsteps in the tainted dews, the tedious track unraveling by degrees, but when the scent comes warm in every breeze, for at the near approach he shoots away on his full stretch, and bears upon his prey. The march concludes, the various realms are passed. This immortal Schellenberg appears at last, like hills this aspiring ramparts rise on high, like valleys at their feet the trenches lie. Batteries on batteries guard each fatal pass, threatening destruction. Rows of hollow brass, tube behind tube, the dreadful entrance keep, whilst in their wombs 10,000 thunders sleep. Great Churchill owns, charmed with the glorious sight, his march o'erpaid by such a promised fight. The western sun now shot a feeble ray, and faintly scattered the remains of day. Evening approached. But oh, what host of foes were never to behold that evening close! Thickening their ranks, and wed in firm array, the close compacted Britons wend their way. In vain the cannon their thronged ward defact with tracts of death, and laid the battle waste. Still pressing forward to the fight, they broke through flames of sulphur, and a night of smoke, till slaughtered legions filled the trench below, and bore their fierce avengers to the foe. High on the works the mingling hosts engage. The battle, kindled into tenfold rage, with showers of bullets and with storms of fire burns in full fury. Heaps on heaps expire, nations with nations mixed confusely die, and Lesotho in one promiscuous carnage lie. How many generous Britons meet their doom, new to the field, and heroes in the bloom. This illustrious youths, that left their native shore to march where Britons never marched before. O fatal love of fame! O glorious heat only destructive to the brave and great! After such toils overcome, such dangers past, stretched on Bavarian ramparts breathe their last. But hold, my muse, may no complaints appear nor blot the day with an ungrateful tear, while Marlborough lives, Britannia's stars dispense a friendly light, and shine in innocence. Plunging through seas of blood his fiery steed where'er his friends retire, or foes succeed. Those he supports, these drives to sudden flight, and turns the various fortune of the fight. Forbear, great man, renowned in arms, forbear to brave the thickest terrors of the war, nor hazard thus, confused in crowds of foes, Britannia's safety, and the world's repose. Let nations anxious for thy life obey the scorn of danger, and content of fate, thou livest not for thyself. Thy queen demands conquest and peace from thy victorious hands. Kingdoms and empires in thy fortunes join, and Europe's destiny depends on thine. At length the long disputed pass they gain by crowded armies fortified in vain. The war breaks in, the fierce Bavarians yield, and see their camp with British legions filled. So Belgian mounts bear on their shattered sides the sea's whole weight increased with swelling tides. But if the rushing wave a passage finds, enragged by watery moons, and warring winds, the trembling peasant sees his country round covered with tempests, and in oceans drowned. The few surviving foes disperse in flight, refuse of swords, and gleanings of a fight. In every rustling wind the victor hear, and Marlborough's form in every shadow fear, till the dark cope of night with kind embrace befriends the rout, and covers their disgrace. To unavert, with unresisted force, the gay victorious army bends its course. The growth of meadows, and the pride of fields, whatever spoils Bavaria's summer yields. The Danube's great increase, Britannia shares, the food of armies and support of wars, with magazines of death, destructive balls, and cannon doomed to batter Landau's walls. The victor finds each hidden cavern stirred, and turns their fury on their guilty lord. Deluded prince! How is thy greatness crossed, and all the gaudy dream of empire lost, that proudly set thee on a fancied throne, and made imaginary realms thy own? Thy troops, that now behind the Danube join, shall shortly seek for shelter from the Rhine, nor find it there. Surrounded with alarms, thou hoppest the assistance foe the Gallic arms. The Gallic arms in safety shall advance, and crowd thy standards with the power of France, while, to exalt thy doom, this aspiring Gaul shares thy destruction, and adorns thy fall. Unbounded courage and compassion joined, tempering each other in the victor's mind, alternately proclaim him good and great, and make the hero and the man complete. Long did he strive this obdurate foe to gain by proffered grace, but long he strove in vain. Till, for at length, he thinks it vain to spare his rising wrath, and gives a loose to war. In vengeance wrist, the soldier fills his hand with sword and fire, and ravages the land, 1,000 villages to ashes turns, in crackling flames 1,000 harvests burns. To the thick woods the wally flocks retreat, and mixed with bellowing herds confusedly bleat, their trembling lofts the common shade partake, and cries of infants sound in every brake. The listening soldier fixed in sorrow stands, loath to obey his leader's just commands. The leader grieves, by generous pity swayed, to see his just command so well obeyed. But now the trumpet terrible from far and shriller clangors animates the war. Confederate drums in fuller concert beat, and echoing hills the loud alarm repeat. Gallia's proud standards, to Bavaria's joint, unfurl their gilded lilies in the wind. The daring prince's blasted hopes renews, and, while the thick embattled host he views stretched out in deep array, and dreadful length, his heart's delights, and glories in his strength. The fatal day its mighty course began, that the grieved world had long desired in vain. States that their new captivity bemoaned, armies of martyrs that in exile groaned, sighs from the depth of gloomy dungeons heard, and prayers in bitterness of soul preferred, Europe's loud cries, that Providence assailed, and Anna's ardent vows at length prevailed. The day was come when heaven designed to show his care and conduct of the world below. Behold an awful march and dread array the long extended squadrons shaped their way. Death, in approaching terrible, imparts an anxious horror to the bravest hearts. Yet do their beating breasts demand the strife, and thirst of glory quells the love of life. No vulgar fears can British minds control, heat of revenge, and noble pride of soul. O'erlook the foe, advantaged by his post, lessen his numbers, and decontract his host. Though fens and floods possessed the middle space, that unprovoked they would have feared to pass. Nor fens nor floods can stop Britannia's bands, when her proud foe ranked on their borders stands. But oh, my muse, what numbers wilt thou find to sing the furious troops in battle joined? Methinks I hear the drum's tumultuous sound, the victor's shouts and dying groans confound, the dreadful burst of cannon rend the skies, and all the thunder of the battle rise. 'Twas then great Marlborough's mighty soul was proved, that, in the shock of charging hosts unmoved, amidst confusion, horror, and despair, examined all the dreadful scenes of war, in peaceful thought the field of death surveyed, to fainting squadrons sent the timely aid, inspired repulsed battalions to engage, and taught the doubtful battle where to rage. So when an angel by divine command with rising tempests shakes a guilty land, such as of late o'er pale Britannia passed, calm and serene he drives the furious blast. And, pleased this Almighty's orders to perform, rides in the whirlwind, and directs the storm. But see the haughty household troops advance, the dread of Europe, and the pride of France. The war's horror each private soldier knows, and with a general's love of conquest glows. Proudly he marches on, and void of fear laughs at the shaking of the British spear, vain insolence. With native freedom brave, the meanest Briton scorns the highest slave. Contempt and fear fire their souls by turns, each nation's glory in each warrior burns, each fights, as in his arm this important day, and all the fate of his great monarch lay. 1,000 glorious actions, that might claim triumphant laurels, and immortal fame, confessed in crowds of glorious actions lie, and troops of heroes undistinguished die. O Dormer, how can I behold thy fate, and not the wonders of thy youth relate? How can I see the gay, the brave, the young, fall in the cloud of war, and lie sung? In joys of conquest he resigns his breath, and, filled with England's glory, smiles and death. The rout begins, the Gallic squadrons run, compelled in crowds to meet the fate they shun. Thousands of fiery steeds with wounds transfixed, flow adding in gore, with their dead masters mixed, midst heaps of spears and standards driven around, lie in the Danube's bloody whirlpools drowned troops of bold youths, born on the distant Saône, or sounding borders of the rapid Rhone, or where the Seine her flowery fields divides, or where the Loire through winding vineyards glides, in heaps the rolling billows sweep away, and into Scythian seas their bloated core convey. From Blenheim's towers the Gaul, with wild affright, beholds the various havoc of the fight. His waving banners, that so oft had stood planted in fields of death and streams of blood, so wont the guarded enemy to reach, and rise triumphant in the fatal breach, or pierce the broken foe's remotest lines, the hardy veteran with tears resigns. Unfortunate Tallard! Oh, who can name the pangs of rage, of sorrow, and of shame, that with mixed tumult in thy bosom swelled, when first thou sawest thy bravest troops repelled, thine only son pierced with a deadly wound, chalked in his blood, and gasping on the ground, thyself in bondage by the victor kept. The chief, the father, and the captive, wept. And English muses touched with generous woe, and in th unhappy man forgets the foe. Greatly distressed, the loud complaints forbear, blame not the turns of fate, and chance of war. Give thy brave foes their due, nor blush to own the fatal field by such great leaders won, the field whence famed Eugenio bore away only the second honors of the day. With floods of gore that from the vanquished fell the marshes stagnate, and the rivers swell. Mountains of slain lie heaped upon the ground, or midst the roarings of the Danube drowned. Whole captive hosts the conqueror detains in painful bondage, and in glorious chains. Even those who escape the fetters and the sword, nor seek the fortunes of a happier lord, the raging king dishonors, to complete Marlborough's great work, and finish the defeat. From Memmingham's high domes, and Augsburg's walls, the distant battle drives this insulting Gauls. Freed by the terror of the victor's name, the rescued states his great protection claim. Whilst Ulm this approach of her deliverer waits, and longs to open her obsequious gates. The hero's breast still swells with great designs, in every thought the towering genius shines. If to the foe his dreadful course he bends, o'er the wide continent his march extends. If sieges in his laboring thoughts are formed, camps are assaulted, and an army stormed, if to the side of his active soul is bent, the fate of Europe turns on its event. What distant land, what region, can afford an action worthy his victorious sword? Where will he next the flying Gaul defeat, to make the series of his toils complete? Where the swollen Rhine rushing with all its force divides the hostile nations in its course, while each contracts its bounds, or wider grows, enlarged or straitened as the river flows, on Gallia's side a mighty bulwark stands, that all the wide extended plain commands. Twice, since the war was kindled, has it tried the victor's rage, and twice has changed its side. As oft whole armies, with the prize o'erjoyed, have the long summer on its walls employed. Hither our mighty chief his arms directs, hence future triumphs from the war expects. And though the dog star had its course begun, carries his arms still nearer to the sun, fixed on the glorious action, he forgets the change of seasons, and increase of heats. No toils are painful that can danger show, no climes unlovely, that contain a foe. The roving Gaul, to his own bounds restrained, learns to encamp within his native land, but soon as the victorious host he spies, from hill to hill, from stream to stream he flies. Such dire impressions in his heart remain of Marlborough's sword, and hawks its fatal plain. In vain Britannia's mighty chief besets their shady coverts, and obscure retreats. They fly the conqueror's approaching fame, that bears the force of armies in his name. Austria's young monarch, whose imperial sway scepters and thrones are destined to obey, whose boasted ancestry so high extends, that in the pagan gods his lineage ends, comes from afar, in gratitude to own the Geat supporter of his father's throne. What tides of glory to his bosom ran, clasped in this embrace of the godlike man. How were his eyes with pleasing wonder fixed, to see such fire with so much sweetness mixed, such easy greatness, such a graceful port, so turned and finished for the camper court. Achilles thus was formed with every grace, and Nerus shone but in the second place. Thus the great father of almighty Rome, divinely fleshed with an immortal bloom that Cytherea's fragrant breath bestowed, in all the charms of his bright mother glowed. The royal youth by Marlborough's presence charmed, taught by his counsels, by his actions warmed, on Landau with redoubled fury falls, discharges all his thunder on its walls, o'er mines and caves of death provokes the fight, and leads to conquer in the hero's fight. The British chief, for mighty toils renowned, increased in titles, and with conquests crowned, to Belgian coasts his tedious march renews, and the long windings of the Rhine pursues, clearing its borders from usurping foes, and blessed by rescued nations as he goes. Treves fears no more, freed from its dire alarms. Trerbach feels the terror of his arms, seated on rocks her proud foundations shake, while Marlborough presses to the bold attack, plants all his batteries, bids his cannon roar, and shows how Landau might have fallen before. Scarred at his near approach, great Louis fears vengeance reserved for his declining years, forgets his thirst of universal sway, and scarce can teach his subjects to obey. His arms he finds on vain attempts employed, this ambitious projects for his race destroyed, the works of ages sunk in one campaign, and lives of millions sacrificed in vain. Such are the effects of Anna's royal cares. By her, Britannia, great in foreign wars, ranges through nations, wheresoe'er disjoined, without the wonted aid of sea and wind. By her this unfettered distant states are free, and taste the sweets of English liberty, but who can tell the joys of those that lie beneath the constant influence of her eye? Whilst in diffusive showers her bounties fall like heaven's indulgence, and descend on all, secure the happy, succour the distressed, make every subject glad, and a whole people blessed. Thus would I fain Britannia's wars rehearse, in the smooth records of a faithful verse, that, if such numbers can o'er time prevail, may tell posterity the wondrous tale. When actions, unadorned, are feigned and weak, cities and countries must be taught to speak. Gods may descend in factions from the skies, and rivers from their oozy beds arise. Fiction may deck the truth WTH spurious rays, and round the hero cast a borrowed blaze. Marlborough's exploits appear divinely bright, and proudly shine in their own native light. Right of themselves, their genuine charms they boast, and those who paint them truest praise them most.